So what was your impression of Marianne when she arrived at the medical base in Vietnam?
Well, she seemed out of place, and the first thing I thought was, wow, she's young, and I thought she wasn't ready for Vietnam. However, she was very curious. She would go around asking, oh, what the traps were like and what were really behind the Green Mountains.
She adjusted to the land very quickly. She began picking up some of the Vietnamese phrases and began learning how to cook all of their dishes fairly fast. She was just very attentive to what was around her, and she adjusted pretty well.
My sister was special, but she wasn't ready for Vietnam. I invited her over because I wanted her to experience what I was experiencing. And she was really intrigued by the land and the mystery and the people. But I didn't expect her to change in this way.
So after the first week, she started asking Martha, her sister, if she could go down to the village, but obviously she said no because it was too dangerous, and also she wasn't really ready for it.
Eventually, Martha gave in and took Marianne down to the village, and I went with them, and she just seemed to really adjust to the village. She was still asking all of her questions. You could tell that she fit right in, even though she looked very different from everyone. She looked like a cheerleader with her bright blue eyes, and she just stood out.
After a while, when she was here for a few weeks, there had been a lot of casualties and she had to try to help. And she really didn't mind getting in there and helping us. She learned how to clip an artery and how to pump in morphine. And eventually she just stopped caring about her looks, her hygiene. She cut her hair really short and she started wearing this green bandana. And she stopped filing her nails, putting on cosmetics. She was a different person, but I kind of admired it. And then I suggested that she should probably go home, but she didn't listen to me.
I remember one night, it was very late, and Martha stormed into one of our tents, and she was freaking out because she had no idea where Marianne had gone. Marianne had disappeared for the night. We were all trying to calm her down. She was very nervous, not knowing where her sister was, especially since she was nervous from the very beginning of when Marianne even arrived. We looked all over the base, and she still hadn't come up a couple hours later.
A couple hours later, we kept searching for her and we couldn't find her. And just after sunrise, I saw her coming in through the wire of our base. And she looked really tired, as if she'd been out all night. And behind her were 6 Green Berets, and they were very quiet and very ominous. And they were just staring at me, and they nodded at her and then left. And she wouldn't say anything about it, and I was really concerned about her.
So eventually, after a few days, Martha told Marianne that she had to leave. And at first, Marianne, she accepted it, the fact that she had to leave. However, later on, she started being really dark and gloomy. And whenever Martha would try to bring her and talk to her, she would always stare at the Green Mountains.
One time in the middle of the night, I stepped out for some fresh air, and I noticed these 7 shadows creeping along in the forest, and I noticed that it was Marianne. I saw her face, and her eyes were no longer a gentle blue. They were this bright, shining jungle green. It was just very creepy, and I didn't really know what had come over her.
So the next morning, after Kat told me that she had seen Marianne, I waited outside the Special Forces gate for the entire day. They even brought me some food. I was waiting there for hours, waiting for Marianne to show up. And, towards the night, I started hearing, music playing from where the Greenies usually lived. And I heard a woman's voice, chanting over the music, and I knew it was Marianne's voice, and I had to go into the house and find out for myself what she was up to. Once I realized that it was Marianne's voice, I had to go in and see where she was. And I went into the Greenies' tent, and the first thing that happened was I smelled, it was a smell of decaying flesh, and there was there were bones everywhere along the floor, and there was candles burning, and it smelled like incense combined with rotten flesh. And eventually I saw Marianne, and she was the one who was singing, and she was coming out of the shadows, and it just seemed like she was a completely different person.
It's a shame how this happened to such an innocent girl, and she was so young. She was only 17 years old.
It just goes to show you how much the war changed some of us. Marianne wasn't even a soldier in this war, and she still was completely sucked up into the life that we were forced to live.
Okay. So personality changes are very common in soldiers who've experienced traumatic situations and have been in traumatic settings. However, Marianne's situation is far more unique than any other person I've ever seen before, because Marianne came from a very naive background, and she was very innocent, and coming into such a grotesque and brutal setting basically corrupted her into this sort of insanity that led to her behavior.
Marianne just completely transformed, and there was nothing any of us could do about it. I lost my baby sister to Vietnam.